Hi, hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel. In this lab session, we are going to discuss how to perform disk encryption on Microsoft Azure Virtual Machine. So performing disk encryption is very essential when you are having the data stored on Microsoft Azure OS disk or data disk. If it is a business critical application, be it financial management or any specific healthcare application, so the data that is getting stored is very vital or very important that you have to encrypt and secure that particular data, right? So Microsoft provides you multiple layers of encryption. In this lab, we are going to see how you can use Microsoft Azure disk encryption to encrypt the data. You can do it for both operating system as well as for the data. And this is mainly to meet out with the data compliance requirement that many organization has to adhere with. So Microsoft can also store the encryption key on the Azure Key Vault, or else you can also have third-party key vault like Bitwarden or any third-party tools to store the key that we are using for encryption. So, but in this lab, I'm going to show you how to quickly create a virtual machine and then check whether the operating system disk is attached, whether it is encrypted, and then once we validate that, we will go and create a key vault. And once the key vault is created, we will use the same key vault. In order to support the disk encryption, there is a specific flag that we have to enable. We will enable it, and we will also check um, whether the disk is encrypted post performing all this step. Okay, so this is what we are going to do. These are the eight different steps that we are going to perform in this lab. So now very first step, we are going to create the virtual machine. So I'm going to create it with the name Stan Azure VM2, and I can just give a password for this particular username. And so one important thing that you need to be aware of, so when you create the virtual machine disk, so you need to be creating a virtual machine which is of a general purpose or standard size. The reason is you will not be able to um, do the encryption on the basic tier virtual machine. So you need to have at least a standard size or the general purpose tier VM. The basic tier VMs don't support Azure disk encryption. Okay, so let's create it. So this VM is getting created from the image, from the marketplace Azure image, and it is going to have Windows 2016 operating system. And once the VM is done, after finishing the deployment, we will capture the details and then see whether the OS disk attached to the VM is encrypted or not. Okay, this will take a couple of minutes to get the VMs created. And we will also validate the VM status once after it is done. Okay, in general, there are multiple things that you need to be familiar with. So there are multiple layers when it comes to storage in Microsoft Azure. The base storage account, if you are storing, let's say, if you're creating a managed disk, it will get stored in Microsoft managed storage account. But as a customer, we can also go for unmanaged disk, which you can use for storing it in your customer managed account. And Microsoft also provides you option called storage service encryption, which can be used for encrypting the storage account. So that way, when the data is in at rest, the actual content can be encrypted. So now if you look at the output, the VM has been successfully created, and you can also see that the details around the virtual machine, what kind of location and other details are uh, visible here. Right now, once after this is done, we can also go and find out whether the disk attached to this VM is encrypted or not. And I can also show you the details of the Azure VM. So let's see that. So this is the VM we just created, Stan Azure VM. So there are also other couple of VMs in this particular um, account. So I will also go and store the variables into this particular $VM symbol. Okay, and we can also get the VM details, the storage profile of the OS disk. So if you look at here, currently the OS disk is here, and it has been created from the image, and it also has the read write catching enabled for this particular VM OS disk. Now let's go and check the status of the encryption of your OS disk, and it will also give the status of your data disk as well. For this virtual machine, we have got only one disk, which is 127 GB, and they are clearly telling us that this particular disk is currently not encrypted. Now let's go and perform the steps to create the key vault first, and then we can also set up the key vault to support the disk encryption. So let's do that. And if this particular command, if it doesn't work for you, then possibly the Microsoft Key Vault provider in your subscription is not enabled. You can go to the subscription under the resource provider. You can go and enable the Key Vault provider if it is not already done. Now I can also go and create a key vault. In this case, this has to be unique across the account. So let me use stand key vault maybe 12345 6. So I just created another key vault with stand key vault 12345. So that's the reason I want to have a unique name. It has to be unique, and you can place it in the same resource group and the location of the virtual machine. So don't put it elsewhere, because when you clean up, you need to clean up the entire set of resources associated with that VM. Now we can go and create a key vault with this particular name, and very important thing, you need to add a particular flag at the very end which says -enable for disk encryption. So we are creating this key vault in order to use it for disk encryption. So make sure you are giving that particular uh, switch at the very end, and that's how you have to do it. So let's give it a minute. So it might take a minute or two for creating this. So we are going to use this vault to store the encryption keys for the virtual machine disk. So for now, it is only the OS disk. You can also use the same vault for storing the encryption key for operating system as well as for the data disk. So we are almost done with the key creation. The next step, we are going to perform the disk encryption. So while we do that, we need to ensure that this particular key vault is enabled for disk encryption. This is the field which we need to verify. And also we get a specific unique resource identifier for our key vault, which you can use for accessing the vault. So generally, I mean, as a best practice, you can go and take a backup or snapshot. If you are doing this encryption for your production system, we have to definitely take a backup or snapshot as a rollback option to restore or to roll back to the previous state if in case something goes wrong with your data during the encryption process. Now I'm just going to store the key information as a variable so that I can execute the command quickly. Right now I'm going to fetch the details and then have the key vault related data put into a variable here. I'm just storing it as a variable. I'm defining and storing it. Now, if you are doing this step for the production system, I highly recommend you need to take a backup or snapshot for quick rollback. But here I'm just going to set the encryption. I'm just going to skip the virtual machine backup for this particular example. And for the production category, you have to do it. So you can allow the same switch, the volume type parameter, to include whether the OS disk or if you want to do it for all the disk, you can just mention this all. Or else if you want to specifically take the data disk encryption, or if you want to perform the disk encryption for the OS, you can just mention volume type as OS or data, or you can also mention all. All will encrypt all the disk in all the volumes in that particular virtual machine, both OS and the data disk. But here I've just given this. And also before performing this, you need to ensure that your virtual machine operating system is compatible with the encryption process. There are certain few flavors of Linux, few distributions of Linux are not supported for disk encryption using Azure Disk Encryption. Maybe we can use other alternate options. For example, there are options like Windows have native BitLocker encryption option within your operating system, and you can also do the encryption at the storage account level and stuff. So while this is performed on the operating system, of course, it is going to take a downtime because it has to reboot the machine and enable the encryption, and it might take up to a few minutes to get this done. So, okay, we will check the encryption status once after the command is executed. So we'll say get Azure VM disk encryption status after this particular activity is complete. So we just have to validate whether the OS volume is encrypted. So I can see that the success status code for this particular command execution, which conveys that the encryption um, extension has been set, and now you can go and check the VM of the disk encryption status. Yeah, it is clearly stating that the OS volume encryption is now encrypted, and if you had some data volumes, it will also be encrypted because we ran the command against all the volume type. Here we don't have a data volume, so that's the reason it says no disk found, but you can see that the OS volume is now encrypted, and also you can just go and check whether the BitLocker encryption is enabled or not within your operating system as well. Thank you for listening.